Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this chapter that we'd have an opportunity to look at the new video formats as well as the old ones from the previous versions of Flash and the differences between using ActionScript 2 and ActionScript 3. So let's save our changes to this version of our Flash site right now, and let's open up our AS2 version that we created in the last chapter. If you have that one available in your files, go ahead and open it up. But if you'd like to start fresh on this chapter like me, I'm going to go over to my File menu. I'll choose Open, and we'll go back to our Chapter 8 folder that's on the desktop in our Project Files. Chapter 8. There I've got a file called Flash Site AS2 8 Start. I'll click Open, and just like before, since our file location is crucial, let's save this file into our work folder. I'll choose Save As. We'll go back into the desktop, Flash website, and I'll save it over the Flash Site AS2 file, or just simply name it Flash Site AS2. We'll click Save As and Replace, and let me just zoom out a little bit so we're ready to work. Now let me just maximize my window here, and this time let's set up our document so that the video goes in the right place to start with. I'll back up my timeline just a little bit, and there we can see the exhibitions area. I'll click on that first keyframe, and we'll just zoom out a little bit so we can see our stage again. I'll just use Command minus or Control minus on the PC, and we'll click away from everything. Now, with nothing selected, we can see that we do have ActionScript 2 selected in our Publish settings this time. So let's go see about adding an FLV playback component. I'm going to go over to my Components panel, and when we pull it out, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different. And that's because this is the component set for ActionScript 2. So that's going to be your main difference. It's just the way the components are written and the language that the components are written in. I still have an FLV playback component, but this one's not going to be able to playback the MPEG-4 video format that we chose last time. Since that means we're going to need to set up another version of our video, let's go handle that first and we'll come back to the component. I still have my Adobe Media Encoder still open, so if I just minimize Flash here, we can see that I've still got it here in the background. If you need to, go ahead and restart up the Adobe Media Encoder, and as soon as you have it ready to go, the first thing we'll need to do is go back and add our original video in so it can be converted into a different format. I'll click the Add button, and if we go back to the Chapter 8 folder, I'll just reselect the original file. It's always a good idea to go back to the original. You'll get the best quality encoding that way. I'll click on Open, and you can see that that's been added to our list and it's waiting for the queue. We'll start with the format. I'm going to leave it on the FLV format because we'll need to use that version instead of the F4V. So let's start by making sure that format's selected. Then we can go off to the preset. You can see it's still holding our website video that we used last time, but this time I want to use one of these FLV versions. I'm going to pick the one called Same as Source, Flash 8 and higher. That'll show us the options for both Flash 8 player and Flash 7 player as well. And just like before, we can double-click the preset name and take a look at the settings. Now I still don't have any audio in this video, so we can just uncheck that box right away. But as we look down at some of the other settings, you can see that my video options are a little bit different. This one gives me two codec choices, Sorensen Spark, which is usable in Flash players 6 and 7, and Onto VP6, which is usable in Flash 8. Now obviously your choice of the player that you're targeting is going to affect that first. The Onto 6 gives us a couple of extra advantages. One more important one is the ability to use an alpha channel. It's the only codec that'll let you do that. And that basically allows you to have a transparent background on your video. Very much like a green screen overlay that you'd see in movies or on the weather forecast. We don't have that for our video, but I am going to use the resize option. I want to make it the same size that we used in our last example, and we set the height to 200, so I'll just double click on the frame down here. I can change that to 200. And since the lock icon's turned on, it should recalculate the width value for me. We also have bitrate settings down below. And just like before, reducing the size of your video and then going after a lower bitrate will allow you to set up your video so it'll play on slower machines. For our example, I'm just going to leave these at the default settings. But I am going to change the output name, and more specifically the location. I'll just click on that panel, and we can navigate back over to our desktop, go to Project Files, and I'm going to go back to our finished files in the Flash website folder. And I'm going to save our FLV file there. We'll just click Save, and I'll click OK to save those changes. Now you can see we're set up ready with our custom preset, and we could even save those settings under a name if we wanted to use them again. Our FLV file's ready to go. All we have to do is click Start Queue, and it'll start encoding. Now that that's all finished, let's switch back over to our Flash application. We've already got our active layer set to the exhibitions content, and my playhead's right at frame 1 where the keyframe is, so all we need is an FLV playback component. I'll just go over to my Components panel. We've already talked about the fact that this is different, but we still get an FLV playback component, and it works pretty much the same. Let's just drag one on out. That drops it right into place in my stage. And if I just check my library real quick, you'll see that a copy of the FLV playback component has been added to my library. It also works with the Component Inspector in the same way. So let's just make sure we have it selected, and we'll go over to our Component Inspector. Now, one of the first things you might notice is that the parameters look a little bit different. They're in different order, and some of them have different names. But we're getting basically the same kind of options. Auto play, auto rewind, auto size. Now you'll notice it says content path instead of source, but this is still going to point to the video that we want to play. So let's set that up. I can use the wizard for this, but we can just set it right in the Component Inspector panel. I'll click next to content path. We get a little magnifying glass, and when I click on that, it'll let me browse to my video. I'll just click on the folder icon, and we'll go over to our Flash website folder, and there I can see my FLV file. I'll click on Open. We'll leave Match Source Dimensions just like before and click OK. Now we've also got a skin, and let's take a quick look at the skin settings. Once again, if I click on it, I get a magnifying glass, and when I click on the magnifying glass, I get a panel similar to what we saw before. What you'll notice first off is there's no color selection. And that's actually one of the biggest differences between the ActionScript 3 component and the ActionScript 2 component. In fact, if I pull this menu up, you'll notice that instead of being able to select my color, I actually get 4 color selections. They're represented by the names. Arctic is going to be a cyan, Clear is going to be a transparent white, Mojave is going to be a tan, and down below Mojave, we've got Steel, which is basically a gray. Now we're also getting fewer selections on the number of controls, but we have the same idea. We can reduce the number of controls if we don't need them. Now I'm going to try a clear over no volume setting for mine this time. I'll click on it and select it, and I just wanted to point out that you can also select none here at the very top if you don't want a controller at all. I'll put my setting back to the choice we just made, and I'll click OK. That's all there is to it. All I need to do is test my movie to see the results. I'll use Command Return or Control Enter on a PC. Click away from that to close my panel. And if we go over to the Exhibition section, there's our video like before. We've got the same kind of controller, a little bit different controls. I can still pause it, play it, stop it, and use my scrub tool to move around through the video. So let's close our test window. Now we've had a chance to see how video works using both the old player targets and the new ones with the MPEG-4, as well as the difference between using ActionScript 3 components and ActionScript 2 components. In all cases, it's actually pretty easy to work with, since most of the work has been done for us in that FLV playback component. There is one more thing I want to look at, and I'm just going to get Flash out of the way for a second, and we'll go out and look at our project files. I'm going to double-click on the project files in the desktop, go out to our Flash website, and I'd like to point out that now not only do we need the FLA and the SWIFT files, but we need to know where our FLV files or our F4V files are in order to have our movies play back correctly. Also notice when you choose a skin, it actually makes a copy of the SWF with the skin you chose and puts it into that folder as well. If you make several choices of skins, you can just throw away the ones you're not using, but make sure the ones that you are using are going to be staying with your FLA file. We'll be needing them when we actually publish our site. Now let me just get back to our Flash application just for a moment so we can save the changes to our AS2 file. I'll just hit Save, Command S, and now we're ready for the next chapter.